Hello, everyone. You're watching News Now from Fox. I'm Regina Gonzalez, and today we're talking about a topic that's made headlines across our nation after Election Day, the legalization of recreational marijuana in the state of New Jersey. Joining me right now is Charles Gormally. He is the co-chair of Brach Eichler. It is a cannabis practice in New Jersey. Mr. Gormally, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and really what it means to practice cannabis law?
Sure. So our law firm at Brach Eichler got involved in the cannabis space a little bit more than 3 years ago. We were probably one of the first sizable law firms in New Jersey to really recognize that the creation of a medical cannabis marketplace would likely lead to a recreational cannabis marketplace. So we viewed that from the law firm's perspective as an unbelievable opportunity to enhance the palette of services that we offer the business community, everything from real estate, land use, zoning, and extremely important in this business, the regulatory expertise that we have in the medical marketplace. So we viewed the potential growth of cannabis and its ultimate relaxation of the laws in New Jersey as creating a real opportunity for the law firm. At the same time, we really saw that the issue of cannabis itself was much larger than just taking a substance that was and still is a Schedule I drug at the federal level and turning it into what now is deemed an essential product. So, and in the course of doing that, there's going to be a lot of social justice issues. And we became way more sensitive over the last few years that it's more than just a business opportunity. It's also an opportunity to square accounts on the social justice side.
Now, piggybacking off of that thought, kind of to backtrack for the viewers, can you explain how the legalization of recreational marijuana ended up on New Jersey's ballot?
Sure. The legislature since earnest, since Governor Murphy became governor, struggled with legislation to create an adult use marketplace by act of the legislature. They couldn't get it done. The tension within the legislature couldn't reconcile some of the competing interests. For instance, how do you deal with folks who last week were put in prison for a cannabis offense that now today we're going to be opening up retail outlets doing the same thing? So the social justice issue became very controversial in New Jersey. It ultimately led to the legislature deciding that the issue would best be put to the electorate. And so they passed a resolution essentially crafting that public question that was put on the ballot. And then it became up to the voters in November who, by a 2-to-1 margin, accepted the creation of adult use cannabis marketplace in New Jersey, which was an overwhelming response.
Now, what was your personal reaction to the vote?
Well, one of the things we did leading up to the vote, because we were so dedicated to this business opportunity, we actually commissioned polling in the 4 months leading up to the election, not so much to validate what we thought was a clear majority of the folks in New Jersey wanting to get rid of these antiquated prohibition laws, but also to probe a little bit deeper as to why somebody would want to do that. And as important, why somebody would vote against it. We think understanding how public sentiments are crafted for somebody who is a pro vote versus an anti-vote is really important for the legislator to consider as we now move ahead. So for instance, one of the overwhelming positive motivations for people that were in favor of creating adult use marketplace was ending the massive expenditure in New Jersey for law enforcement, as well as imprisonment that has a disproportionate impact on minority populations, which was a real eye-opening finding. So folks were saying not only isn't cannabis prohibition not working, but we're also wasting a lot of money, a lot of taxpayer money in trying to make it work. It's time to end that. It's time to regulate it and tax it, because that's really what folks want.
Now, talk about the action that your law firm has received ever since. How are entrepreneurs and people already in this business trying to get their foot in the door for when businesses open up in New Jersey?
Well, it's been nonstop since the election, put it that way. I think while we maybe had thought that it was a foregone conclusion, the marketplace was really waiting for this vote to occur. And since it's occurred at all levels of business, both businesses that actually touch and come in contact with the plant, like growers or processors or retail outlets, they're the obvious folks that have been sort of ringing the phone off the hook as to how they can get involved. But it's also beyond that. There's plenty of folks that don't really have a particular interest in cannabis, but they see it as a particular business opportunity. For instance, if you own a warehouse that is no longer functioning as a warehouse, it might be a very suitable location with proper security to grow cannabis. What you're going to see now, I think, as a result of pandemic and the impact it's had on commercial real estate, particularly retail locations, we're going to have a glut of commercial real estate in New Jersey. Each of those locations might be appropriate for retail outlets to deliver cannabis to the consumer ultimately. So we're not only getting interest from people who want to get directly involved in cannabis, but those that are surrounding the industry, packaging entrepreneurs, as I say, landlords. There's a pretty robust interest in cannabis. From personally, in the 40 plus years that I've been practicing as a lawyer, I've never borne witness to the creation of an industry overnight like we're going to see in New Jersey. So it's a really exciting time in cannabis, and this opportunity is going to be phenomenal for New Jersey, particularly how it's located in this regional marketplace.
Now, you brought up several very good points. How soon do you think we can see dispensaries, businesses, all of that opening up and giving those people that opportunity?
So that answer is a little complex because you would think, what's so difficult? Now we just flick the switch. It's a weed. Can't we just get it in the stores? This is going to be a very highly regulated business. So just to give you a little sense of how what I learned from the history of the medical marketplace in New Jersey, when Governor Murphy started as our governor a few years ago, there were about 30,000 registered patients in our medical marijuana program. Even at that time, it was difficult for the medical outlets, and there's about a half a dozen of them in New Jersey, to have enough supply of product to even service that number of folks. Since then, 95,000 people have enrolled in the medical marijuana program. So to say that there's a shortage of medical marijuana would be an understatement. So what you see happening at these facilities is, and they're doing their best, by the way, they're increase their grow, they're increasing their processing. All of this product has to be grown and consumed within New Jersey. So it's not like they can dial up California and send some extra cannabis to us. They have to create it here in New Jersey. And that's a time-consuming process. It takes a long time. So one of the things Governor Murphy is attempting to do now is determine whether or not our medical marketplace has some excess supply that it could release to the recreational marketplace. What I tell clients who are interested in this business is that it's going to take some time to really have a full-blown recreational marketplace up to speed. And probably most of 2021 will be consumed by getting it up and running.
Now, I've seen that lawmakers are already trying to establish regulations and really a parameter for how this will work. What is currently going? Can you kind of explain how that's been going?
Sure. One of the reasons I say it's going to take some time is even though the public overwhelmingly adopted the public question on the issue, now the legislature has to go back and create enabling legislation. For instance, one of the really important things they have to do is decriminalize the mere possession of cannabis. So even today, as we speak, you have a constitutional amendment that says you can have adult use cannabis, and at the same time, it's still a crime in New Jersey. So details like that have to be managed by the legislature. One of the details is, how is this market going to look? Are you going to allow an unlimited number of retail outlets to exist? We do know that the legislation is going to include provisions that say individual towns in New Jersey can decide whether or not they want to allow cannabis businesses to open in their business areas or within their towns at all. And if they do, they will participate in the tax revenue and in fact can impose their own tax on cannabis. I believe it's 2%. So there's a financial incentive for communities to welcome cannabis businesses into town. But there's also going to be a political calculation that happens. And if you look back again to what happened in medical marijuana, when it first came in, there were many communities, even before a single dispensary was opened, that for whatever reason thought it important to declare that they don't want cannabis in their town. I think some of that is short-sighted. It's a little near-term thinking. The same thing happened in Colorado and California, and then towns turned around. And really what has to happen is people have to overcome the last barrier to cannabis acceptance. I mean, we're taking a product that as recently in recent history, at least at my age, back in the late 70s, was considered a killer weed or a gateway drug. And we've converted it now to essentially being viewed as medicinal, as in essence, a product that can be used to move people away from opioid addiction, as well as something that can be enjoyed responsibly as a recreational product. So that's a very large spectrum of public opinion moving from, killer weed to an essential product. And it's going to take some time for communities to accept that. I do think ultimately most folks will begin to accept it. And as I'm sort of a cannabis tourist in a way that I'm both a member of the California bar and Colorado bar. So my business allows me to go out to those locations and actually see these operations. And this isn't a situation where you're walking in with the incense and the beaded curtains like you might imagine from a Cheech and Chong movie. This is more akin to walking into an Apple store where you've got high-end graphics, a lot of scientific information provided about cannabis, counselors who can help you understand what a particular product, what result it might create in you. And as a result, community acceptance, I think, will be robust even in the beginning in New Jersey, but there's going to be pockets of communities that for whatever reason don't think that it's appropriate for their town. And New Jersey is a big home rule state that allows communities to make those kind of decisions. They won't participate in the upside of that revenue. But I'll give you one specific example. Even in communities that don't allow a physical location for cannabis, the legislation that's currently being considered will allow home delivery. So we're creating a new business, and at the same time, think about creating a new business when Amazon didn't exist, where you didn't have robust home delivery. We're creating a business now with all these expectancies of the market. We want to, order something and have it delivered the next morning or delivered within a couple of hours. That's going to be how cannabis is going to propagate in New Jersey, not only from retail locations, but also delivery services.
Now, how do you think this will impact surrounding states, New York, Connecticut, all of that?
Well, okay, this is where I think I really want to put on my New Jersey cheerleader hat, okay? New Jersey has such a tremendous opportunity right now, and I didn't see anything like it, except I think back to the 70s when when the same public question allowed us to begin casino gambling in Atlantic City. At that time, the only other place you could gamble really was Las Vegas. You didn't have Native American casinos, really weren't a thing at that point. They really hadn't started to create. New Jersey created a monopoly of gambling in Atlantic City, and it changed. The first few years of gambling, there are intense commercial activity, hotel development, buses heading down the parkway to head to Atlantic City. Tremendous opportunity, and it became a regional source for gambling. Folks from New York and Pennsylvania readily traveled there. Now you've obviously had gambling dissipate a little bit more, and it's sort of sunsetted Atlantic City a little bit. Cannabis opportunity in New Jersey, in the most densely populated state to so far legalize cannabis, is a tremendous opportunity for New Jersey entrepreneurs, because New York accessibility from the PATH train into Hudson County, or even from northern parts of the state, Philadelphia access into southern New Jersey, creates tremendous opportunity for New Jersey to position itself as a super supplier, as a hub of cannabis demand throughout the entire region. Now, while I say that, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out, if somebody from Pennsylvania travels over to purchase in New Jersey, that's an appropriately legal action for somebody in Pennsylvania to do. The minute they get in their car and drive home with cannabis, they're committing a federal crime. So, do we really think that people are gonna travel across state lines with cannabis? We know they're going to. I mean, let's be practical. We know that's going to happen. Do we think that the federal government is going to impede that? One of the things we've seen over the past few years is, while still illegal at the federal level, the federal government has signaled that so long as you comply with state law, they're going to take a back seat. So federal law enforcement will defer that action. At the same time, Cory Booker is promoting legislation now at the federal level to end that kind of, I call it a schizophrenic view, where an act can be legal in New Jersey, but if I walk across the Delaware River, it's now illegal because I've now transported it across state lines. That needs to end. And the only way that can end is if the federal government revisits its categorization of the drugs and basically steps away and allows interstate commerce. By the way, when that happens, the cannabis market is blown open wide, because now I don't have to grow my product in New Jersey. I can buy excess capacity from Washington State. I can create an efficient marketplace and treat cannabis in the same way you treat Budweiser. You don't have to brew Budweiser in New Jersey. You brew it wherever and you get it here however you can, and you can sell it to your consumers. So I think ultimately that's where the cannabis market's going to go.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Now, my last question, and I feel like a lot of viewers are asking this question. I've seen it on a lot of outlets. Is weed legal in New Jersey right now?
No, possession of cannabis is not legal right now. And that's one of the things that the legislature, I think they introduced a bill Monday, maybe on Friday, to really get to the other side of decriminalization, to reform our criminal code so that possession is not illegal. They're trying to do it all at once. They're trying to create the adult use marketplace and the regulations that are going to be necessary to do that. They created a whole new government commission to manage cannabis within New Jersey, both medical and recreational. And at the same time, they'll modify our criminal laws to allow possession of cannabis purchased through those marketplaces. Cannabis purchased outside of the legal marketplace will likely remain illegal. But one of the important goals here is to make a cannabis marketplace so accessible that access to the black market, where folks have to buy their cannabis previously, will evaporate, either because you're going to be buying a better product through the legal channels, a cheaper product, and a legal product at that point. So we think that ultimately, we think the legislature will get us there.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Unfortunately, people are still being arrested for cannabis, and people are still being imprisoned for cannabis crimes. One of the real challenges here, and it's the debate that's going on in New Jersey right now, is when you tax and the government profits from a cannabis business, what should they do with that money? And very strong advocates for social justice are advocating a position that I personally believe in as well, that those funds should be addressed to the populations that have been disadvantaged by 30 years, 40 years of cannabis prohibition laws that declared them felons, imprisoned them, they lost their right to vote. Many people lost their families and livelihood as a result of it. There's a way to address this through distribution of those funds. That's a very important thing for us to challenge and do.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your insight. This was very interesting. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Gormally.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.